Oh, you've done a few of these.
Sorry?
You've done a few of RDAPs lately.
I don't think so.
I know you're on the. You're not on the last one.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I was going to say good morning. And good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting. We have two matters on today's meeting. And I would officially like to open the meeting at 1:06 p.m. I acknowledge that we are hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and are joined by people from other lands around the state. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. This meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Regulations 2011. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of the Planning and Development DAP Regulations 2011, and members are reminded to announce their names prior to speaking. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. Today's meeting is made up of panel members from both the councils of Shire of Capel and Shire of Narrogin. We will deal with the items individually. Our first part of the meeting, part B, the membership for our meeting today will be Councillor John Ferguson. Right. He's just going to switch his
camera. Thank you. Acknowledge Councillor John Ferguson present.
Thank you. Councillor Peter McCleary. We have to my left, Mike Moritz, Specialist Member. To my immediate left is Dale Page, Deputy Presiding Member. And my name is Francesca Lafanti, Presiding Member. We have no apologies for this section of the meeting and no members on leave of absence. The minutes of this meeting will be available on the website. Part B deals with the Shire of Capel, and we have, as I've already indicated, one item. Members, could I have a show of hands that you have duly considered all material today in relation to Part B of the agenda and related information? And online, I can't see Councillor online. Councillor John Ferguson.
I'm not sure why the feed's not working, but anyway, I acknowledge I have read the documents.
Thank you. Whilst you're not visual, we'll just have to get you to verbally indicate as we move through the meeting.
You must be in the same room as those guys with Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are there any disclosures of interest in relation to this matter? Councillors, did this go before council at all? If there are no disclosures of interest, we will move on to the item. Item 3.1 is a series of lots on the corner of Ferndale Avenue, Ashburg Link and Starlight Bend in Dalyella. It's a proposed childcare premises. We have a presentation for today's meeting, Mr. Regan Cake, and in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024, clause 4.8.2, presentations are limited to 3 minutes and there's been no extension of time noted. Accordingly, we encourage you to present your information and focus on the key aspects within the time frame, noting that at the end of your presentation, there'll be an opportunity for panel members to ask questions on both your presentation and other elements of the proposal. Following that, we will then move to Shire officers. I'll then hand over to yourself.
Awesome. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Regan Cake from Dynamic Planning and Developments. We're the applicants for the childcare centre at the corner of Ferndale, Ashburg and Starlight Bend in Dalyella. I've also got Chris Harmon from Satterley and also Scott Ferguson behind me from Fugertia Property, who are also involved in the projects and the landowner. Firstly, just want to touch on the Responsible Authority recommendation and note that we support the recommendation for approval. We were fortunate to have the ability to discuss the conditions prior to our being submitted, and all conditions of approval are accepted by the applicant. Just briefly to touch on some of the local site context, the site itself is within a existing residential subdivision that's currently by Dudley. The site is located at a street corner and is bound by 3 separate street frontages, and then to the east of the site are existing residential lots that are in the process of being titled or have very recently been titled. The school, the childcare, is in close proximity to 3 different schools, being the Truro Forest Primary School, the Bunbury Baptist College, and the Bunbury Cathedral Grammar. The development itself will accommodate 92 children and 17 staff, and the operator will be Nido, which will be a premium offering to the local community. After some discussion with the Shire, the access to the development will be one way in off Ferndale and out onto Starlight on the north. There's a total of 19 on-site bays being proposed, with an additional 8 street car parking bays, which will have a direct pedestrian link to the centre itself. The bulk and scale of the development will be single-storey primarily and broadly consistent with what a residential type outcome would look like with regard to site coverage and setbacks and other bits and pieces like that. The operation of the centre will be governed by a number of different management plans: parking management plan, operational management plan, noise management plan, and a waste management plan. All of those ended up in by the Shire as part of the building permit and throughout the development process. Just finally, some of the key considerations that we worked through with the Shire as part of the process. The first one was access. We're originally looking at 2-way access in off Ferndale, and then 2-way access to Starlight in the north. There were some concerns raised through the prior RDAP that was prepared, and also potential amenity impacts on the residential properties to the east. We then sort of revisited that situation and thought a one-way circulation pattern would be much easier by way of disbursement of traffic and also impact on residential amenity, and that's sort of how we arrived at the plans that are before you today. The other matter was car parking. There was a shortfall identified in accordance with the Shire's requirements, but through some additional justification that was provided throughout the assessment process, we're very confident that on-site parking can be managed appropriately and there won't be any overflow to the surrounding streets or area. The protection of residential amenity as well, obviously being in residential neighbourhood, acoustic, traffic, all those sorts of impacts were worked through quite comprehensively with the Shire to get to the outcome or the recommendation of approval. And then also this one was considered by the Shire's DRP as well, and there were some recommendations around the design of the centre itself, which was modified throughout the assessment process and ultimately resulted in what we considered to be quite an effective design for the site. That's it from me. If there's any questions, I'm happy to respond. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Members, are there any questions? Yes.
You have that image back up when I was originally looking through this document, the street parking on Starlight, is it? One to the west. It wasn't showing up like that. So you're putting in the new base because they don't exist at the moment.
Correct. Yeah, that's it.
It works.
Yeah, that's correct. And they're proposed to be 15-minute short stay to primarily accommodate some pickup and drop.
And the driveway you're showing down the bottom, the properties that are east of that, does that mean you're going to use that driveway in common so it's wider than a single lane?
So there's an existing easement that a portion of it is benefiting and burdening us, if that makes sense. It's sort of shared with the adjoining properties to the east. We are only proposing to use the most portion of it and then have a line marking and signage on the bits and pieces that restricts the use of the other half.
The other question I have relates to waste management. A lot of your traffic movements deal with trucks picking up bins and stuff. Yep. So you're going to have a specific thing for food waste that'll have to be emptied on a regular basis. Have you accommodated with how that might work in that process?
Yeah, so the actual, finite details of that will be dealt with through the actual waste management plan that gets done and prepared as part of the building permit process, but there's certainly sufficient storage and space for vehicle manoeuvring on site to accommodate that.
Because they're pretty noisy trucks when they come to suck those bits out. So my only concern with how that's going to work. But right, that's it.
Thank you. Are there any Just getting a bit of feedback. Thank you. Are there any other questions from panel members? I have a couple of questions for you. My questions go to the access. I note on the information we have that it's single left in from Ferndale. Plans that you've got on screen, as well as the material that we've got, does show two-way, a physical ability for two-way. My question is, what are the controls that are in place to prevent to Ferndale, given its proximity to the highway?
I think there was updated plan set that actually showed a narrowing of the crossover into Ferndale. I'm not sure if that was the ones that were attached to the agenda or not.
I'm just having a look at the... What date do you say those plans are?
Don't have them in front of me, unfortunately.
And we've got entry only. It's got a 5.5 metre crossover, which would still accommodate.
Yeah.
And it's the date is November 24.
There is also entry only and exit only signage at both ends of the site, and there'll also be sort of one-way line marking within the car parking area that'll be permitted. Up through also there'll be a range of signage that'll be installed to, I guess, alert parents bringing children to the site that'll be the case. And then usually once you've got an established pattern of behaviour for the parents coming to the childcare centre, hopefully they'll be aware of that one-way circulation.
Thank you. My second question is in relation to noise, and the information that we've got provided in the assessment, talks about the noise emissions and the noise model taken. It talks about play area, plant, car parking, etc. It also talks about two things. One, my read of it was that it would be compliant, requiring a 2.1 metre fence. Must include that fence. That's the first question.
Yeah, correct, yes.
And there was also that the assumptions did not take into account staff parking and or staff doors, noting that the staff would arrive before 7 a.m. Are they taken into account as part of your management plan?
Yeah,
The report appeared to indicate, the material I read appeared to indicate that somehow they were excluded from the noise assessment undertaken.
Yeah, they were definitely included. My knowledge, and there was some discussion with the Shire around the conditions as well prior to today's meeting, that there would need to be restrictions on where staff can park prior to 7, and that would be included in both the noise management plan and also the parking management plan as the conditions of approval. So essentially away from the residential property, they would need to park if they're going to turn up prior to.
Thank you. They were my my other question, and you might not be able to answer this, has noise from child play is not considered to contain any annoying characteristics. And what is defined as annoying characteristic?
Question may be better directed to an acoustic consultant.
Play is one thing, but generally make more noise than just play noise.
Yeah, they do. I'm not sure what that would necessarily be.
And it goes to the question then of, well, how are you going to manage the annoying characteristics if the rest are okay?
Yeah, I think the way the noise management plan and other bits of the operation management plan will be structured is there'll be limitations on the amount of children outside at any one time to control the impact of the noise from those children.
Thank you. They were my only questions. Is there any other questions from panel members? Sorry. Councillor John Ferguson, I can see you.
Thank you, presiding member. Look, my question arises from the ones that you've just asked about the noise issue and the existing residential premises across from the front street where the play area is. It's rather interesting to me that the play area is around the external perimeter of the proposed structure or establishment, and that the issue of child noise control largely is going to revolve around management of the number of children that are present at any one time in that precinct. Now, that seems to me to be a fairly vague control mechanism, and this type of thing that's very difficult for the Shire, for example, to monitor or indeed apply regulatory framework to, or indeed could cause a residential neighbourhood complaint. So is there any way, or is there any comment you've got in respect to that in terms of management of that noise issue?
Yeah, the primary comment and the primary way that noise is managed in this instance is actually the fencing to the perimeter of the play area. So the alternative was to potentially have the play area internally, but you're going to be much closer to the properties on our east, which is sort of residential neighbours that directly abut. So the separation provided by Ashburg Link and then also the 1 metre high fencing does act as quite a suitable acoustic barrier for children or children's play noise, I guess you could say, to those residential properties. So the acoustic consultant is very confident that with the combination of that fencing and then also operational and noise management plans, that there won't be any exceedances to the noise regulations as part of the operation of the centre.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, John Ferguson.
Thank you, Presiding Member. The other question I had, I can't quite see on the material I've received. In addition, I can see 4 car parking spots to the west perimeter, but I can't see, I think there's another half dozen somewhere, but I can't see them on the actual plans that I've seen. Now, I'm not sure whether this falls into the province of the presenter currently speaking, but I can't quite see where the other car parking areas are. And my colleague here has presented me with a piece of paper which maybe answers that question, but it's still not entirely clear to me. So there's a number on the immediate western precinct. Is that the total number that's required to comply with the council's requirements?
So there's 19 on-site bays. There's 4 additional bays on Ashburg Link, and then there's going to be an additional 4 bays on Ferndale Avenue, sort of quite close proximity to the crossover into the development. So the combination of the 19 plus the 8 meets the council requirements.
Is it entirely wise to have parking bays in Ferndale, given that that's ultimately going to be a much more activated thoroughfare?
Ferndale Avenue, I think, had plans to be quite a significant signalised intersection, which were abandoned recently. So I guess what exists there presently is the ultimate outcome. And there's also existing sort of on-street bays in that location as it is currently.
Well, I have to say I've got my misgivings. And also the slip lanes coming off the Forest Freeway into Ferndale, which are indicated to have a fairly moderate volume of traffic at the current time, but your own traffic assessment indicates that traffic volume will intensify. And it's clearly, whilst it's not quite where the original proposal was some time ago to have a major junction on the Forest Freeway, the likelihood is that locals will get very attuned to using this as an alternative to Norton Parade. And to access the freeway, particularly heading to the north and accessing it from the south. So I wonder whether you've really given and thought to the fact that the traffic density and volume over the next decade is likely to increase substantially, even though you've indicated that numbers don't necessarily demonstrate what happens at the time and at the moment. So my question is it entirely wise to put a childcare centre where you're going to have a significant, substantial increase in traffic volume foreseeable into the future?
Yeah, the traffic consultant and the engineer behind it models all of the, I guess, existing traffic and then into the future, as you said, and the numbers they modelled, they're very confident that access is safe, the road network is going to accommodate the traffic, and the existing parking bays that have been proposed can all operate safely and functionally.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at this juncture to the applicant? Thank you. We will move to officers of the Shire. We have, I have listed here Karen Holmes and Bob Whalen. Are you both online? Would either of you like to make general comments about the proposal and or any responses to matters you've heard in questions today?
Hi, thank you, panel members. I suppose the applicant's already demonstrated and provided enough background. In terms of process, the applicant's been responsive to the design review panel process and taking into account Shire officer advice. We've worked with the applicant in terms of the conditions, and we're satisfied that the application can function in the format it is and the manner it runs. In terms of some of the concerns raised just then about noise, there is a condition that's either 13 or 14 that talks about noise management and I suppose scheduling of activities for outdoor play areas. And there's a few of those sort of elements that will guide how it will be managed, and then that'll provide enforcement mechanisms for non-compliance if necessary. In terms of parking, the Shire was satisfied with the access arrangements and the parking provision and the form of that parking provision. It's noted that Ferndale Ave is potentially quite a high volume road, but there are a number of centres in Dalrympleport at the moment operating to the south on Norton Promenade and Parade Road. They're similar sort of capacity roads, and there's been no real issues with traffic movements or any of those sort of elements, noise associated with traffic. So the Shire is quite comfortable with this proposal.
Thank you. Panel members, are there any questions to Shire officers? Yes, we're moving first to Dale.
Yes, I have a few questions, if you don't mind. How do you feel about us extending the validity period of the approval to 4 years, given that time frame aligns with the DAP regs and pretty standard amongst other local governments? Are you happy with the 4-year validity period?
No,
it's not me.
Oh, not me. Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, sure. There's no objections to extending to a 4-year period.
Okay. Condition 3 states prior to an approved building permit, but your other conditions talk about prior to lodgement of a building permit. It might sound nitpicky, but is there a specific reason this condition is different?
No, that would be, in fact, prior to the lodgement of a building permit.
Okay. Condition 5 refers to an environmental noise assessment. Is that the Lloyd George noise assessment mentioned in condition 4? And if so, should we say that rather than just an environmental noise assessment?
Sorry, can you state the question again, please?
So condition 5 refers to an environmental noise assessment. Is that the Lloyd George noise assessment mentioned in condition 4? And if so, should we say that rather than just reference an environmental noise assessment?
Yeah, I'm not certain if that specifically relates to the acoustic barriers or not. I'd have to get clarification.
Okay. Can I move on, or do you need some time for that?
It's more of an environmental health. I don't know, Bob, if you could.
I suppose it would be helpful to just leave it as it is, and that way we can refer to what we need in terms of assessment. It was provided on the advice of our environmental health team, which aren't available at the moment, so I don't want to kind of commit to one way or the other how it's worded.
Okay. All right. Condition 7 relates to a waste management plan. It appears to be worded to require a noise management plan as part of the waste management plan. Is that the intent, or should condition 7B rather be an advice note?
No, my understanding is that the noise management plan is a part of the waste management plan.
Okay. Also, that condition refers to a specific person, namely your CEO, which is unusual for a planning condition. Is there a specific reason you refer to your CEO rather than just the Shire of Capel?
No, that could be the Shire of Capel.
Okay. Do you need condition 9, given the matter appears to have been covered under condition 5? Also, it wouldn't, under condition 9, it wouldn't be appropriate for the walls to be constructed prior to lodgement of the building permit. So would you be happy to do away with condition 9, given it's a duplicate?
The only thing would be there is an advice note that is tied to condition 9. So if that was referenced, the advice note is advice note 11, and that talks about the aesthetic design of the wall.
Right. Well, we could change that to condition 5. I'm just mindful that condition 9 talks about requiring the walls to be constructed prior to lodgement of the building permit, which isn't technically appropriate. And it seems to have been dealt with under condition 5 anyway.
Sure. I suppose I'm just checking. If condition 5 could have designed and constructed, that would probably be okay as long as it's linked to the advice note 11.
Would you prefer to retain condition 9, but make that then prior to occupancy?
That would be acceptable, yes, thank you.
Okay. There seems to be an extra condition included between conditions 9 and 10. Are you happy for our team to renumber administratively for the purposes of the minutes?
Yes, please.
Condition 13 states that prior to occupation, the noise management plan must include a list of things. Does this refer to changes you want to the Lloyd George report, or is that the separate noise management plan under the waste management plan? It's not clear.
Yeah, so sorry, this one is separate. So the waste management plan has elements or noise elements to be addressed. This is more about the ongoing management of the facility in relation to the childcare aspects.
Okay.
So, accessibility, activities, use of the outdoor play area to control, I suppose, its operations, minimise impacts on noise to the neighbouring properties.
Okay, so where is the requirement in your conditions for that overall noise management plan? Because I asked earlier about the reference to the noise management plan, and the answer was that's part of the waste management plan. But it seems you're either looking at 2 different noise management plans, or you're lacking a condition requiring an overarching noise management plan.
It could be an overarching management plan. We just want to make sure that we're covering all the aspects. So one is about the waste management, and one, I suppose, yeah, it could be an overarching management plan as long as it covers all the elements.
Is condition 16 necessary? It seems to be covered by separate legislation, and it's not really a planning condition.
Yeah, that could be removed or put as advice since it is covered by separate legislation.
Okay. Advice note 1 refers to condition 15, but it actually refers to condition 14. Are you happy for us to correct this administratively as part of the overall renumbering of conditions and advice notes?
Yes, please.
Okay. Similarly, it appears advice note 12 incorrectly refers to condition 12, which relates to stormwater management. Which condition does advice note 12 relate to?
Condition 12 will relate to condition 11.
Condition 11 deals with acoustic, condition 11 deals with engineering of your footpaths and the car parking areas. Is that what the advice note relates to?
That's correct.
And you're happy for us to deal with that administratively?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from panel members? If there are no other questions, we will move to the agenda. There is a recommendation at the beginning of the agenda. As per the standing orders, we will deal with the recommendation as written at the beginning of the agenda. Is there a mover for the recommendation as written? It is moved, Councillor Peter McCleary. Is there a seconder? It is seconded, Councillor John Ferguson. Would you like to speak? Would the mover like to speak to the item?
I've read through all the documentations, and in most cases, this is in compliance with the planning approvals. And I heard the conversations about going on to Ferndale. Ferndale's still unknown because they're left in, left out. It's the highway. I did visit the site. It's a greenfield site. Nothing's been built on it. They're just still actually digging the holes on the ground there. I did a school at the other end of Ferndale, and I imagine traffic movements will, once that opens up into the highway, will change the traffic configuration and make it flow a lot better than what it does after school times. There's also a lot of comment about whether one's needed, but that's a commercial ground. I think general practice that a daycare centre is required in the town. There's quite an overabundance, and we see a lot of people to get applications into build them at various locations. We talk about street movements and stuff. There's another daycare centre on the corner of quite a busy intersection, which is Norton Prom and Parade Road. So I'm not seeing that has different entrances, but it's right on that area. So it's well away from this site. The other advantage that I see in having this fitting into the community, there's a sporting oval, there's a school. It's in proximity to people that might be dropping off their kids to school and coming in to the daycare, a good flow of arrangement. There's the street at the back, which has another access, maybe not getting used by Ferndale, and there's more development to the north of this site, which will open up a lot more pathways for people to access the site. As I said, I had some concerns. I do understand the noise things, and I think the acoustic walls and stuff addressed all that. Fence height's quite higher than a normal fence on that front area, which is accepted in so it'll block out quite a bit of noise. It's also got a solid wall, as my understanding. The window things are a perspex stuff, so it controls sound that way. I accept that there's probably going to be some changes to conditions and things like that to fit it into administrative requirements. So all in all, I think this is a worthwhile development in the area.
Thank you. Would the seconder, Councillor John Ferguson, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. I'd just like to endorse Councillor McCleary's comments. I expressed my reservations about the actual potential build-up of traffic in Ferndale, but also it has the complementary advantage that for people who don't live in the immediate Dalyalup area, say at Jallorup, Capel, Petma Grove Beach, Stratham, what have you, and maybe commuting into Bunbury for work or whatever, it may well be a very attractive element to access a centre that doesn't require you to drive through the labyrinth of Dalyalup streets. And so I think that on balance, I'm quite supportive of that aspect as a reasonable connectivity asset, and also the fact that there is other assets further to the west regarding public schooling and the like. And in many respects, I see this as a quality development. As Councillor McCleary's commented, it's a greenfield site, and to the extent noise may arise to the east, I guess one might say, hopefully not in such a cavalier way, but it might be a bit of buyer beware. People would be aware now that that centre exists, and they would presumably be looking at that property acquisitions with the child centre in position, and it may well be seen as locally as an asset. So I actually think this has been one of the better ones I've seen, and I actually am comfortable in seconding it and commending it.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on the motion? Yes, over to yourself, Dale.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Before I speak to the primary motion, I'd like to move a few amendments, please.
Yes.
I'd like to move an amendment to condition 1 to extend the validity period of the approval to 4 years.
Is there a seconder for condition 1? It is seconded. Councillor Peter McCleary.
Thank you, Presiding Member. The reason for this is this aligns with the DAP regulations and it's standard amongst many other local governments to have a validity period of 4 years.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the amendment?
No, thank you, Presiding Member.
Any other speakers? All those in favour? Is carried unanimously.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Then I'd like to move an amendment to condition 3 to use the words prior to lodgement of a building permit instead of the words prior to an approved building permit. I'll provide my reason 1 second.
Is there a seconder for amendment 2, which is a small change to the beginning of the condition? It is seconded. Mike Moritz.
Thank you, Presiding Member. The reason for this just creates consistency with other similar conditions and clarifies exactly when the construction management plan needs to be submitted to the Shire.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the item?
No, thank you, Presiding Member. I'm sorry, my apologies.
Seconder Mike Moritz. Yes.
No, I think it's straightforward.
Are there any other speakers on amendment 2? If there are no speakers, would you like a right of reply? We're going to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. That's amendment 2. Would you?
Yes, please.
Continue.
Thank you. I'd like to move another amendment, amend condition 9 to state prior to occupancy, the acoustic walls fronting Ferndale Avenue, Ashburg, Lincoln Starlight Bend shall be constructed to the satisfaction of the Shire of Capel.
Is there a seconder for amendment 3 to condition 9? Yes, it is seconded.
Thank you, Presiding Member. And the reason for that is the walls can't be constructed or shouldn't be constructed prior to a building permit. If the Shire wants to keep both conditions as it has confirmed, then it needs to be clarified that one condition, condition 5, relates to the design of the structures prior to building permit, and condition 9 requires construction prior to occupancy.
Would the seconder would you like to speak to the item? Are there any other speakers on amendment 3? There are no speakers. Would you like right? We're going straight to the vote on amendment 3, which is a modification to condition 9. All those in favour? Is carried unanimously.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Then I'd like to amend condition 13 to require submission of a noise management plan to the Shire prior to occupation that includes those matters currently referenced in the condition.
Could you just read that out, please?
So the wording would be, because at the moment the condition states prior to occupation, the noise management plan must include those dot points, but there's nothing that requires submission of that noise management plan. So I'm proposing that the condition be amended to state prior to occupation, a noise management plan must be submitted to the Shire for approval and shall include, but not limited to, those dot points.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? It's seconded Mike Moritz. Would you like to speak to it?
Not much further other than the condition isn't currently clear that a noise management plan needs to be submitted. It just talks about what it needs to include.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to amendment 4? Are there any other speakers on amendment 4? If not, do you want anything further? We're going to the vote on amendment 4. 2024, which is a modification to condition 13. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously.
Thank you. And then a last amendment, thanks, presiding member, to delete condition 16, which requires connection to reticulated water and sewerage and installation of grease traps, and to include as an advice note instead.
Is there a seconder for amendment 5? It is seconded. It is seconded. Peter McCleary, would you like to speak further?
Thank you. Just very simply, presiding member, these are matters covered under separate legislation and don't need to be planning conditions.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to it? Are there any other speakers to amendment 5 on condition 16? There are no other speakers. Would you like to reply? We are going to the vote on the deletion of condition 16 and replacement as an advice note. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously for the minute taker. But we are back to yourself to continue with your...
Thank you, presiding member. Reverting to the primary motion, I'll be supporting the recommendation for approval. Although the proposed use isn't a use in the residential zone, it has been advertised for public comment. The submissions received have been duly considered and reported on, and the proposal meets the objectives of the residential zone that apply to the site under the approved structure plan. I note some submissions raised the issue of land use, and that certain residents were under the impression the site would only be developed for residential purposes, given the residential zoning that applies. I completely understand that this could be confusing and a source of concern, and I hope that the explanation in the report has provided clarity to those residents that there are a handful of non-residential uses that can almost always be considered in the residential zone, and this is one of them. The Shire's report has provided a thorough assessment of how the proposal addresses the matters requiring consideration under clause 67 of the planning regulations, and how the proposal meets the key objectives of the state's draft position statement on childcare premises. Also achieves the intent of the local development plan that applies to the site. And even though there's an access point to Ferndale Avenue, which appears to contradict the LDP, the proposed access is left out only. And this achieves the intent of the LDP not to have vehicles reversing into Ferndale Avenue from the site. I feel the proposal has been designed to minimise impacts on surrounding residential uses. Specifically, any impact on directly adjoining neighbours is minimised by the fact that the site is surrounded on 3 sides by roads. The play areas have been located furthest away from the closest residential neighbours, and the building largely takes the appearance of a well-designed residential dwelling, so won't really impact the amenity of the area. The design review panel's feedback of the proposal was taken into account and changes made into response, and the Shire's report demonstrates how the proposal now meets the design principles of State Planning Policy 7.0. There is a parking shortfall on the site itself, but the Shire's report demonstrates there's adequate parking available for the development if on-street bays and nearby bays are taken into account. And the number of bays provided also aligns with the state's position statement on childcare premises. And finally, I'm satisfied that the traffic impact statement concludes that the surrounding road network can comfortably accommodate any traffic movements generated by the development. So happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the item? Sorry. Is any further speakers to the item? No further speakers? Substantive motion. I'll speak to the motion. A lot's been said already on the proposal. I would concur that the proposal is appropriate within the planning framework. It includes all of those elements of both the scheme, the structure plan, the local development plan. And from my perspective, it's an appropriate design for the site in its particular configuration. Unique in that it has 3 road frontages, creating a great opportunity for the development to interact with the street, as well as having the opportunity to create design mechanisms to minimise the impact on the neighbouring property. The built form aesthetics and materials are consistent in scale and appearance with other development in that area, and has a residential element attached to it in terms of its proposal. I'm satisfied that the matters raised of concern have been addressed appropriately within the documentation and that the proposal is appropriate on this site. Are there any further speakers on the item? If not, we move back to the mover for right of reply and close of debate. Would you like to?
Thank you to my learned friends and panel members that certainly covered bases on everything that I could ever think of on a development. The development complies with the applicable planning framework, reflects best practice in urban design, and addresses all concerns raised by the residents. Taking into consideration that people have put submissions in and they've been addressed adequately, it's just go to see what happens in the long term and how it settles in once it starts operating. So therefore, I commend the to the vote.
Thank you. The right of reply has been had. We are going to the vote, the substantive motion inclusive of the amendments. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously for the minute taker. Move back to the agenda. There are no Form 2 applications listed and there are no Section 31 application reconsiderations. At this juncture, I would like to thank Councillor Peter McCleary and Councillor John Ferguson for attending this meeting and for your participation in this meeting from the Shire of Capel. It is now 1:52 p.m. and we will be changing members and moving to Part C. Seconded. All those in favour? It is carried. And while we change members. Good afternoon and welcome to Part C of our meeting. It is 1:54 p.m. and we are resuming the meeting. Excuse me. I would like to welcome Councillor Graham Broad and Councillor Lee Ballard from the Shire of Narrogin to participate in this part of the panel meeting. Our councillors are to my furthest right, being Councillor Lee Ballard. Next to Councillor Lee Ballard is Councillor Graham. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Councillor Graham Broad, Councillor Lee Ballard. To my further left is Mike Moritz, Specialist Member. We have Deputy Presiding Member Dale Page and my name is Francesca Lafanti and that is for Part C of our proposal. We will now move to declarations of due consideration. Members, have you duly considered all matters before you, noting that there was late material provided today in relation to this item and placed on the website. Members can I have a show of hands that you've duly considered the material provided.
Madam Presiding Member, could I just flag that although we did get the information this morning, and I think it's appropriate to flag that although I have read the information, I'm not sure that I have digested it to the extent that I would ordinarily have liked. I don't think it precludes me from being part of the meeting, but I will address that further through consideration of the item.
Thank you. Panel members, does anybody else wish to make anything? We're going now to the due consideration vote. We'll go back to that. We have heard from member Dale Page some comments in relation to the late material that was provided to all members this morning. We're going to have a show of hands that you've duly considered sufficient for your discussion today. That is unanimous for the minute taker. Members, I will ask for any declaration of interest, but I'll first ask both councillors whether this matter was considered by a council meeting. Members, councillors, do you have any declarations? Panel members, does anyone have declarations in relation to this item? There are no declarations in relation to this item. We will move on to item 3, which is proposed development, proposed solar farm and battery hybrid project, and it is Pontine and Parks Road and Great Southern Highway. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correct. Waneri, thank you. The road in Narrogin. Apologies for that poor pronunciation. We have one presenter for today's meeting, and I will move to Rebecca Hampson if you would like to present. Rebecca, in your presentation, you have only got 3 minutes to present, but you have also heard that there's been some late material provided, and you can speak to that should you wish, and if you feel it's appropriate, as well as you're aware that there's been a submission that you've provided in relation to conditions and response that we also have received from officers, and I would also provide you the opportunity to speak to those. I'll provide the same to Shire officers when we move to that point. Over to yourself.
The Shire is recommending there be a 4-year development approval granted to the Narrogin Solar Farm project. This project involves the development of a solar farm and battery storage project at a site approximately 3.7 kilometres south of town. The Shire planning report, which is generally satisfactory in its scope and content, recommends several proposed conditions of approval, some of which are problematic in that they are unsound, not feasible, or unreasonable. They also overlap with matters already addressed in the traffic impact statement and other specialist reports, and are superfluous and possibly conflicting. They therefore require review and removal or replacement by the panel. Our suggested conditions streamline the execution of the project to better focus on the issues of the development at the site and how best for Narrogin Solar Farm to manage these. Condition 5 requires rewording to apply to post-construction establishment of plant screening. Conditions 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and 16 are not necessary and should be removed. Condition 3 relates to matters that are already covered in the TIA. Condition 5 requires a condition to be achieved and cleared prior to construction. Condition 10 relates to existing site access that do not require further approval. Condition 11 requires a decommissioning and rehabilitation plan. Both actions are not part of this application. Condition 12 requires a public art contribution, which has no foundation in Shire planning policy. Conditions 13 and 14 require a contribution to a yet to be established community enhancement fund, raising questions about its justification, fairness and legality. This policy was endorsed by council post-lodgement of this application, and there is currently no state planning framework that applies to the creation of these funds. However, the proponent is happy outside of a planning application to have negotiations with the Shire to establish this. Condition 16 relates to a bushfire management plan and is considered superfluous. Condition 19 requires compliance with co-consultant reports that already form part of the application. Condition 21 requires road upgrade contributions for Pontine and Parks Road, which are not necessary for the project's operation and financially burden its viability. The justification for these upgrades has not been provided by the Shire, and we note that the unconstructed nature of Parks Road, the use of that will be limited both during the construction and the operations phase.
Is that all you? Thank you. Members, we'll go to questions from this presenter. Are there any questions to this presenter at this junction? Yes.
Just a couple, if that's okay. So in relation to condition 21, sorry, could you just embellish why you think it's unnecessary for the road upgrades that the Shire has requested? And I'm also keen to understand whether or not the need for those upgrades was discussed with you before or during assessment of the DA.
No, the road upgrades were not discussed prior to us lodging the application. We've had a detailed site visit and we visited Parks Road, and the decision by the proponent at that stage was no heavy vehicles could move down that road anyway, so it might be just used for maintenance on an ongoing but there's enough access to move across the site from another road, so we don't need that road basically.
The Community Enhancements Fund, so your planning report states that there is intent, or you already have begun to engage with the Shire about the Community Enhancements Fund, goes into some detail about that. How far down the track have you got with those conversations with the Shire?
That's a matter between the proponent and the Shire.
So you've not been involved in that directly?
No, and the proponent is involved in probably 20 renewable projects across Australia, so they're fully aware of, yeah.
We have further questions. Was it from Councillor Graham?
Councillor Ballard, President Ballard.
Beg your pardon. Names around the wrong way again. Councillor Lee Ballard.
Just a question in the transport impact assessment. You've got a photo of every access point bar one, which is the end of a unmade road. So any reason why that's missing from the?
Because the proponent made the decision, like we use maybe for maintenance once every 12 months.
Definitely used maintenance, won't be used during the construction period.
Any further questions? Yes.
Mike Moritz, you made some comments with respect to the conditions, and since then the process here has asked for the council to make comment on those. Have you got any comments on the revisions that they have suggested?
They've accepted quite a few. The sticking points is the Community Enhancement Fund that we believe should be outside of the planning process, between the proponent and the Shire, not involved in planning. We don't have a planning framework in Western Australia at the moment to deal with that sort of matter. So, and then just the provision of public art as well is, problematic one.
Any other questions? I have some questions. Can you speak to the glare assessment? And I'm particularly interested in comments on the glare assessment that deal with the road and for a minute. I'm particularly interested in the glare assessment on the highway, and it talked about the extent of that glare. It talked about volume of traffic on that in the documents, the volume of traffic on the road. What are the mitigation actions that specifically in relation to traffic? And I read through some of that material and they had kind of, classifications. It got quite technical from my perspective. So where I'm really getting to is what glare are motorists going to get and what is the mitigation action to ensure safety on road?
Yeah, well, first of all, because it's a red road, it's 50 metres back from that road, from the boundary. And then solar panels, they move through the day, but they can all be programmed individually. So like if that section had glare at any stage, they program it so it doesn't move into that. And this will happen all over the site.
So that is programmed using climatic conditions to ensure that the glare is met.
The detailed design will work out which way the panels are going.
Yep.
As to reduce, so they go up and they get flat in the middle of the day and then they go down. But if that is going to produce glare for there, they'll start flat and then move through here.
And then the report also talked about glare at night, obviously from the lights, and it had some sort of general comment about could be managed. Can you speak further about that, or one of your team can speak further about that? Again, I think it was specifically in reference to the property that's closest, and I think the numbers in the report talked about 60 metres from edge of.
So they're 20 metres to their property boundary, then there's an unconstructed road reserve, and then there's another 20 metres, so it's 60 metres before the solar panels start from that house.
But the lights, so that's for the solar panels, but then for the lights itself, in the report, it talked about some general requirement. What are the, to what extent is there going to be glare, and to what extent is it actually being mitigated? Because it seemed to say that we'll do the best we can, but there'll be some that will fall outside the boundary. And I'm trying to get an understanding about the level of amenity impact of that.
If I may.
Yes, absolutely. Come up. Yes, definitely. Sorry. Did anybody else?
Ross Montgomery. I'm a colleague of Rebecca's at Land Insights. So with the glint and glare study, what was identified, as Rebecca indicated, is that it's not until you install the panels that you can actually properly calibrate them. They're all fairly much individually automated, so that whatever pitch they need can be, because it does generate, in peak times, it generates a lot more power than can usually be uptaken. So you can actually decommission certain areas of it by tilting it so that it's not glaring at those times. At night time, it's unlikely that there would be a lot of light source emanating from the site at all. There's no need for it to be lit. Any reflection from passing road traffic would be unlikely to reflect. However, as part of the screening for the visual impact, the proponent is going to undertake to do fairly extensive planting of screening vegetation to the road edges in particular. At the moment, there are some really effective stands of trees and shrubs in certain points, but there will be some gaps which can be filled and replaced. And so that's part of the strategy to just screen it. I don't know how familiar you are with solar farms, but it's surprising. Most of the time they're horizontal. And so you're actually from 1.5 metres, you're looking at the edge of the panel. So a lot of the time it doesn't look a lot different from, say, an intensive orchard or something like that, where you've got trellising and that sort of thing. And any glare is occurring above the panels. It's not actually going to take place at eye level. And this site in particular is fairly flat. The house you mentioned is, as the closest one, does have an intervening ridgeline between it. And the thinking is that there is that space within the site and the ridgeline where, if there was to be any apparent emission of light or glare or whatever, that could very easily be screened with landscape planting and or modifying the tilt of the panels at that time. It hasn't been identified in the study as an area that would be receiving a lot of glare. And
the landscaping you're referring to, is that on site or is that in the road?
It will be on site.
Oh, okay.
It'll be contained on site, but as you would be aware, we would need agreement from main roads and also the Shire to do planting along the road, in the road reserves. And also, when it's in the road reserves, the proponent doesn't have any control over maintaining it or making sure that it's planted to the required density and species. So
great. And I got a couple of other questions in relation to it. Can you just confirm? I've read through the report, and it's talked about operational and construction phase. The construction phase, the 200 workforce accommodation, is not physically on site. There's a crib room and a few other bits and pieces, but it's not on site.
We're not proposing any workforce accommodation as part of this application.
Not even through the construction period. Okay, so I wanted to clarify that particular element.
I think, if I may, that was one of the questions or quibbles we had with the conditions, is they tend to mash up the construction period with the operation period. So most of the issues that need to be managed are pretty much during the construction period in terms of amenity. And once it's constructed and operating, there's very few people actually going to the site, and the internal roads are really used occasionally. They'd probably be used less for the solar farm than they would currently be for the farming operations that are on the site.
And the reports talk a lot about the amenity impacts, and one of the amenity impacts is local context of the area. Now, you put in your report an unusual comment, which I thought I would query, and it was in the context of the impact of this in a visual sense. And the language that was used is it's not a lot different from an array of trees or an orchard, such as a line of grapevines as in a vineyard. I found that odd for a solar farm, given the documentation we have, which shows kind of all of them in your perspectives at the end of the material. Could you provide some, either of you?
Sure.
I didn't see solar farms having any characteristics that were similar to trees of an orchard or grapevines. So could you explain that?
I think I wrote that comment. I can vouch for it. I think the reference there is that it's an orderly pattern it's the patterning of the panels, and likewise with orchards, you still have that pattern. So you have rows and lines, and some of the comments that people make about solar panels is it's the scale of it and the fact that it's so organised. It's not in a natural pattern as such. However, the point I'm making in that is that you get that same effect with vineyards or orchards. You get that sort of patterning across it. The other thing is that if you've seen any of the solar farms up around Narrogin, a lot of those, when you go and view them, they really, as I previously said, you really only see the side profile of the panels. It's not as though the panels are facing directly towards the viewer. So unlike other structures and things, you're really looking at it side on as a profile.
Okay. And there are my questions I have at the moment. Any
follow-up? So sorry, just to follow up, we were talking about planning conditions. So it seems there's been last minute agreement or conversation with the Shire about planning conditions, a large number of them. Was there any conversation during the assessment process with the Shire about conditions?
We asked for draft conditions, but we didn't receive them.
So we would have preferred to have had a viewing of the conditions, and then we could have helped with formatting them so that they are able to be implemented, because quite often with conditions, the kitchen sink gets thrown into the condition, whereas in fact, you just need to have an advice note that tells you how you need to comply with that condition. And so that's really our thinking, is that with a tidy up, those conditions can be made more effective and easier for the Shire itself to implement, because they're quite clear on what the requirements are for them to clear the condition.
I have a couple of other questions about amenity. The amenity issues talked about dust, noise and odour. Odour was referenced in relation to the short construction period. Can you speak to that particular aspect in terms of?
Well, odour's probably very limited. It'd probably be down to the crib rooms and the on-site facilities, but the installation of solar panels is more in terms of the noise and the dust management.
Those elements that you're talking about, the crib room, etc., are going to go once construction is complete.
Yes, yes. And they probably, given the vastness of the site, will actually move as the development takes place. Yeah.
In terms of noise, that was also referenced in construction period, so that's fine. I don't need any comment on that. Dust talked about it in construction period, but it also talked about dust in the context of the soil post the construction. Have you got any further comments to make in relation to the management of essentially the surface, the ground surface, once the proposal is completed?
The lots will still be grazed. So it's when it rains, there'll be feed for the sheep, and wouldn't create any more dust than a normal farming practice.
So on the grazing, it indicated in the material that we had that there were a series of new fencing going in there to control movement inside. I took that to read, it was also controlling where the grazing could occur on the site.
So the whole site, just because it's a very expensive asset, will be south will be fenced, north will be fenced, and then the best facility will actually have additional fencing just because of security measures. Then some fences, as we move across, will be taken down to allow solar panel arrays, and then in conjunction with the farmers that are currently on site and will continue to farm the land, we can then.
Okay, so all areas through our management mechanism are available for essentially grazing, albeit in a controlled manner.
Yes.
Fairly much. It's obviously sensitive areas, so the battery storage facility would be that would have exclusion fencing, but panels themselves are actually, there's a lot of literature about synergy between solar panels providing shelter and so there's no incompatibility between the current use and the solar panels.
Thank you. And can you speak about the remnant vegetation that is being retained on the site? And you also talk about with no further clearing and looking at other ways to enhance and protect that. I know that you've also got a forest study that talks about any species on there, but the extent to which that is being protected, is there none of the remnant vegetation?
We have enough land outside of the remnant vegetation to put the required amount of solar panels over the site.
And so with the replanting that's going in for the screening, this will be a net positive in terms of reinstating vegetation from what's currently there.
Okay. Thank you. And then the final comment I've got is that you referred to SPP 2.5, rural planning, and you talk in the context of the appropriateness of the activity, moving away from the more traditional agriculture, and you referred to it in the context of I think it's 0.3% of available agricultural land. It talked about in the report the broader region encompassing, it's got a number in there, while the designated area only has a smaller number, and then it talked about this 0.3 of available agricultural land. Can you talk a little bit further? Are we talking and it appeared from my read of it, it's on a much broader scale than the Shire.
Yeah, so you have regions. Yep. So like in our mapping, you would see we have regions. And so for our applications of these types, we work out this is how much out of this region we're taking. So, yeah.
So you're saying that essentially this development will have minimal impact on the available land.
Within the region,
and also taking account that the farm itself will still have continued grazing on it.
And we're not putting solar panels over the whole farm either, so like farmers can still carry out operations on the site as well.
Can you go back to that? When you say you're not putting it on the whole farm, I'm just going back to my plans here.
So farmers will still be living on site. There are areas that are not being filled with solar panels.
Farm, there's a broader area for the farm than there is for the solar panels.
Yeah.
Well, the whole area will be available as for grazing, and there are areas of the farm that are not required for the solar farm, and those will just continue to be managed as they are at the moment by the farm.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Yes.
Can I just follow my question up there? What's the arable percentage that's not the arable percentage of the farm that's still going to be available that's not under solar panels?
We haven't calculated that. It's a figure we can give you if it's something that's going to help you.
Looking at the map here, and it would be a lot of what I thought.
The research we've done so far does not suggest that putting the solar panels on to that farm is going to significantly diminish the grazing capacity of the farm.
Thank you. Any further questions at this juncture? Thank you. You can just stay seated. There's no problem. Officers. Let me just find. Oh, sorry, you will have to move now. We've only got the one formal spot there. I'm going to ask you how you pronounce your name because I'm not going to get it right.
Classmate.
Yeah, but I'm still not going to pronounce it right.
Huzzah.
Thank you. Okay, over to you. Would you like to make any comments on the proposal before us? Any comments in relation to what you've heard today in the presentation? Any comments in relation to the additional material that was provided through R13 of conditions?
Thank you, Presiding Member. First of all, I'd like to thank the applicant for providing us a very comprehensive report in terms of the supporting documentations. Although we're not technically minded, a lot of those things help to sort of in some way allay some of the concerns from a mitigation concerns raised by the community and so forth. From the Shire's point of view, a number of those issues raised, particularly in reference to, say, the conditions of concern, particularly in reference to the Community Enhancement Fund and the Shire's policy regarding to public arts, are all that the Shire has proactively approached in terms of implementing it to, in a way, improve the benefit of the Shire, given that the Shire will face with quite a number of renewable energy. This is one that's proceeded, and through that process, the Shire has seen in its view in terms of how those benefit bring to the community and the legacy to the community at large. So hence why the Shire has taken an approach and implement those policy to improve the overall community aspect and the benefit to the community, as opposed to those development coming in and nothing is returned to the town. So in that perspective, we're looking from that perspective, the outcome as to how the benefit would improve the overall community. In terms of some of the conditions, as much as I'd like to agree in terms of having that conversation up front, unfortunately, in these instances, our CEO did not have a chance to completely review those report and the conditions that have been put forward, hence why we do not have the opportunity to sort of afford those conditions as part of the process. It's good that we had the opportunity to sort of review, and through the discussion with the CEO, we provided a number of those amended comments, amended or revised conditions, and comments along to as to why the Shire is requiring those conditions to be missed, held, or in some way amended.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions? Yes.
Yes, please. I have a few. So just in relation to the Community Enhancement Fund, there was some commentary in the report that the Shire and its community will host this development, and that's why you seek to impose the development of the fund. But I'm keen to understand what the development is going to draw from the community. So apart from it being within the Shire, what's it going to draw that would require a community enhancement fund in your view?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this is a relatively new policy. The intent is to more or less look at how the community within the Shire can sort of benefit from one of which is for the Indigenous training, arts and culture, all building improvement and so forth, as to where the benefit can in fact improve the overall community from a social, from an economic, as well as from a physical aspect from the town itself. So we're not just building something and then everyone says, hey, we've seen this new development, but what are we getting from a community perspective? So those is where those are the things that the Shire as a whole is saying, hang on, let's be strategic in terms of how we approach this thing, rather than sort of they're doing their own thing, we're not interested. Where if you get some sort of benefit, then you know from the community's point of view, hey, we're getting that. Concerns that's being expressed by the community is, why have all this development, we're not benefiting the community? So through this community, and as part of our strategic direction from the elected members in terms of how they consulted with the community, those things have been raised and addressed, and hence why to the Shire, to the CEO and executive manager say, how can we benefit this? And through that request from the community in terms of the concerns that's been raised before a lot of this renewable energy comes into play, saying, hey, let's look at that and develop in a more proactive, and concerns that's been raised is now been incorporated as part of what can we do to benefit the community. And these are being heard, and through that aspect, the policy has been developed to say, right, let's help the community at large, not just for the developer to do what they want to do and then it's just a development, and before we know, it's like, what's it for? What the benefit you get? And those are the questions we see on a daily basis. And to note that no doubt the elected members would agree and concur, those are the concerns that's being raised, and hence why we've developed this policy.
Okay. So just in relation to that, and I know that this is dealing with some of the regional DAP stuff that we deal with, it's popping up in the region. So I can understand the desire and the need for some of that. What I'm trying to understand is the planning need nexus for this application. So we're being asked to make a decision on imposing the need for a fund, and I can understand that. And I note that in the applicant's submission, they talk about proactively engaging with the Shire and coming to an agreement outside of the planning process, and that would be amazing. But in relation to the planning need nexus, that's something that I'm struggling with generally with these community enhancement funds. How do you link this application in a monetary sense to the need for the community enhancement fund? What's the planning need and nexus?
I agree with the, comment in regards to where does it fit from a planning framework. Although from the state government, there's nothing there sort of to tie it in from the community. But I think enhancement policy, from we're looking at from the other eastern state in terms of how to develop it. And hence why we looked at it as an example. And no doubt through our CEO and elected members, they've approached the ministers from planning and so forth and say, right, what can we do given that now we're experiencing this? What can we do to develop policy that will entice, not entice, but benefit the community at large? And I agree from your perspective, if we don't have a planning framework currently, but no doubt with the, proliferation of a lot of this renewable energy, no doubt a lot of the local government will be, and no doubt they are currently discussing about all those things and how can we in some way put that across and have that implemented through the planning framework.
Okay, thank you. Moving from that to something different. So condition 3 requires a construction management plan. On page 14 of your report, you reference a construction traffic management plan. Are they the same, or are you looking at two different construction management?
The construction management plan are in some way a combination of the construction management plan, which incorporates some of the aspect of the traffic management plan.
Okay. Looking at condition 3 still, could you clarify for me the difference between the wording of condition 3L as you are now proposing it be worded and the wording you initially provided in the report? I'm struggling to understand the nuance there. Why is it different? What is the difference?
Right. The reason for the L and condition L in reference to contact details of builder and details of the complaints handling system to be used throughout the building process. Is that the one you're referring to?
Yeah.
So the reason why the proposal is to amend it is because as part of the submissions received or the comments from the applicant is that a complaint register will need to be maintained by the Shire for the proponent to respond to. So, and hence, in that sense, what we're trying to say, right, hang on, it's not for the Shire to register, and hence why the proposal is to amend it to say, right, contact details of the builder and a complaint management system to be maintained by the component as opposed to the Shire. We're not the ones to be registering this complaint. It should be from the proponent, and to demonstrate how those concerns are being addressed, because we're in a period whereby no doubt during this infancy of the development, where you will get a lot of concerns by the neighbors. But through time, with a lot of these issues being addressed, no doubt it became adequately addressed, and no doubt the community say, yeah, it's not an issue. Perceptions are like, and if it's perception, it's going to be, the reality is quite true. Okay. So we're trying to address all this up front.
Moving on from that, I note your comments in relation to the obligation of the proponent. Are you expecting that both they gather and manage the complaints? I've seen conditions like this, but they have also included a requirement that a copy of it to be provided to the Shire as required or on a regular basis, so that there's a mechanism for the Shire to be able to view the approach or the mitigation action taken. Do you have those kind of requirements, or would you would expect the Shire to be able to request that material?
Through my planning experiences, we do, but at this point in time from the Shire, in terms of where they are prescribed or noxious industry previously, those are the things that we've included as a condition for my planning as an advice note, whereby it is to be registered and that the Shire is notified of any complaints. So on an annual basis, we would go to for those businesses, prescribed business, where as part of the process on annual inspection or annual monitoring, for them to say, right, where's the register, how many complaints you've received? So as part of renewal, we say, right, how are we addressing those concerns in terms of pollutions and food, noise, and so forth? And I agree to the chair, to presiding member, yes, I think there's something that should be could be incorporated.
That's okay, thank you. So back to need and nexus on something different. In relation to condition 21, could you explain to us why the Shire feels it's necessary for the road upgrades as requested? And from your perspective, was this discussed with the applicant before or during assessment of the DA? And is it actually necessary to seal the road, or would some sort of an upgrade be enough? There are a few questions in there.
To the chair, I mean, ideally, given that we're talking about an increase of the traffic from a normal 2 or 3 property owners traveling that road, and now looking at contractors coming in with 400,000 solar panels to be installed. So no doubt there'll be an increase of traffic. And I think from the Shire's point of view, we've always want a lot of those roads that's being used to be sealed where it's appropriate, on the basis like a lot of rural Shire, we don't have the resources, and when we do get an opportunity, we will try.
Right, okay. Looking at your advice notes 3 and 4, it looks like there should be one advice note, is that correct?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
They're actually one. All right. If this panel was of a mind to go with your recommendation for that you have before us today, would you be happy for us just to correct that? Lastly, from me, on page 15 of your report, it states that an environmental management plan is required. However, the applicant's planning report seems to include such a plan, and I don't see a condition around an environmental management plan. So could you clarify that for me, please?
Part of the scheduled submission, the public and one of these government agencies make reference to the environmental impact assessment, and in a way what we've said as part of the process is those issues have been adequately addressed from my perspective in terms of the concerns that have been raised.
Okay, so there's no need for any further action. It just talks about it because it was an external agency comment, but there's no need for a separate one in your view. Okay, thank you. That's it from me for
Any
now.
further questions from panel members? I have a question specifically in relation back to this, the Community Enhancement Fund. I'm going to get my sort of expected benefits from a development of this nature for the broader community. It's about the proposal pushing back into power back into the as a benefit. It talks about providing opportunity for staff employment in the area. What sort of expectations does the Shire have? I don't know if you can comment about the sorts of things that this development particularly and development generally should give back. And I understand the concerns about just general growth and development, but that's the question I've got. And it's in the context that the development has assessed it in terms of land use and the ability to deal with the discretionary land use on this site. So what's the nuance, the expectation of this development? I'm not familiar enough with your other developments that you'd expect them to give back in. That's a planning issue. There's broad general community issues and economic development issues for the town and the Shire. But in terms of planning development, what sort of things are you expecting?
Thank you, Presiding Member. From my perspective, from a planning framework, like I said, there is not a lot there that we can hold these conditions. I think from my perspective, I'm taking direction as well from our CEO as to how we can say, look at in terms of based on the policy we have, as to what it can do to incorporate. I agree in terms of the nexus from a planning perspective and planning framework. There's nothing there for us to sort of impose, but from our perspective, these are the things that the Shire strongly believe that it needs to, on the basis of, in a way, putting up front as to what our needs are from the community perspective. And then understand it's not part of a planning framework.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't quite get all of that, but thank you for that. Those are my questions. I don't have any other questions at the moment. Does anybody else have any other members have any questions at this juncture? I will move back to the agenda. There is a recommendation in the agenda at the beginning of the agenda. There is material provided by the applicant and responded to by Shire in relation to a series of conditions. As per the DAP standing orders, we will ask for whether or not there is a mover of the recommendation as written in the agenda. If there's no mover of the recommendation as written, so that lapses because of no seconder, is there a mover of the recommendation? Yes.
Please, Presiding Member, I would like to move an alternate recommendation to defer this application up to 30 days to enable the Shire to engage with the applicant on the proposed amendments to the conditions of the approval and to enable the panel to properly consider a consolidated set of conditions as well as the applicant's planning report. And I'll speak more to that in a bit.
Is there a seconder for the motion to defer? It is seconded. Mike Moritz, would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Presiding Member. So had a good look at the information that was provided to us, both in the report and the little bit of information that were provided that form part of the applicant's application. I guess the last minute adjustment to the conditions, it's pretty standard for this panel to receive requests from applicants, once they view the agenda on our RDAP website, to say, hey, I don't like that condition, can you tweak this condition? But we were faced with a situation where almost all the conditions were challenged in some way, or a large number were challenged. And in response, the Shire came back with amended wording, not only for those conditions, but for most other conditions. And I understand now why, through questioning, why that occurred. And I will say that I think in many cases, the Shire's amended conditions are worded appropriately, because when I worked through the set of conditions that were recommended in the report initially, I picked up a lot of the issues that the applicant raised. And when the Shire came back with the amended conditions, there was quite a bit in there that I agreed with. I thought, yes, that is worded better. But it became really confusing towards the end as to which one are we dealing with. And this panel then has to move all of those as amendments on the floor. It becomes really messy, and it has the potential for things to slip through the cracks, and then you're left with a development to, at the end of the day, to enforce and police and so on. There were just a lot of questions that I still don't have answers to, as well as the fact that this panel received the applicant's planning report this morning at about 10:30, and it's irrelevant what the reasons were for that. The fact is, as an individual panel member, I was able, fortunately, to have the time to very briefly read that submission, but I don't feel hand on heart that I can say that I properly digested it and applied critical thinking in putting that in the pot with all the other issues. So I would be much more comfortable to defer for up to 30 days. So we're not talking a long period, to allow the Shire and the applicant to go away and have a conversation about these conditions, and for this panel to receive a refreshed report that picks up on the issues that the Shire has heard in this chamber today, as well as one set of conditions where we might have one or two things that we're debating on, not almost every condition. And I would also appreciate then the time to properly review the applicant's report that was provided as part of the application. So this deferral doesn't speak to the merit or otherwise of the application itself. At this point, I just need further time and information to properly digest the information before me, hence the recommendation or the alternate motion to defer. Thank you.
Thank you. With the seconder to the motion, I'd like to speak to it.
Thank you very much. So it's Mike Moritz here. I concur with everything that's just been outlined by my colleague here. I think it's would be a much tidier final approval if there is a deferral and some more work done by both the applicant and the Shire with respect to tidying up the proposal. I think there's a lot of potential merit in this particular proposal, but obviously a little bit more work needs to be done to smooth off the rough edges, if you like, to get a satisfactory proposal before a group like this process. So, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on the motion, either for or against the motion? I will speak to the deferral. I also concur with the deferral. There is a lot of positive aspects about the development. There are some elements that I've raised today that I have concerns about. I do have concur with the comments about the significant number of condition changes and fully being able to evaluate the impacts of those. And I do have view that a number of conditions need, where a proposal is supported, need to ensure that there are mechanisms that are clear about what is the obligation, what is the timing, and what is the reporting mechanism back to the Shire. Otherwise, it is questionable as to what is the purpose of a condition if it doesn't tie those elements together. Like others that have spoken, there was a substantial volume of material that was provided this morning. And like everybody else, I have read through that material and obviously spoke to a number of those elements. And thank to the applicant for providing some clarity. From my perspective, I do think that a small deferral will enable me to be satisfied that the concerns that I have raised in relation to generally amenity issues, as well as the issues that have been raised regarding the amendments, are appropriately covered off for this panel to make a determination on. Those are my comments. If the panel members have no further comments, I will move back to the mover for right of reply
Nothing from me. Thank you, presiding member.
The motion is going to the table, to the vote. All those in favour? Is carried unanimous for the applicant. There's a 30, what the determination was today was a 30-day deferral, up to 30-day, I should say, deferral. We always refer to language of up to. That provides timing for everybody to deal with what's due. And to provide that further information, noting for both the Shire and for applicants that it must come back to this panel within 30 days or by the latest of 30 days. There is no legal mechanism under the DAP for a second deferral outside of this decision-making body. So just to reinforce the importance of the limited time frame, we didn't ask if you require further. We've obviously indicated that a short time frame would be sufficient for those matters to be covered. So that's just an information for the applicant as well as Shire officers. So I will now move back to the agenda. We have no form 2 applications. We have no section 31 reconsiderations. Part B, there is listed the SAT applications and I won't speak to those. And accordingly, I close today's meeting at 2:46 p.m. Thank you for your attendance.